Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar sponsored by OnApproach. My name is Pete Kears. I'm Senior Engagement Manager for OnApproach, and I'll be moderator for today's session. The topic today is using data analytics to find the sweet spot between mission and profit. Our presenters today are Scott McClellan and David Fields. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat or the question during the session, and I will read. Scott and David, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Great, Pete. Pete and Mark, thanks so much for allowing us to be here. I'm Scott McClemens from CEO Velocity, and what I do is help credit unions just like you all use their data to provide greater services to your members, to strengthen your brand, and to make your employees more productive. So my expertise is to make analytics really work for you. David?
I'm David Fields, and I am one of the owners of a consulting company called Solve. At Solve, what we do is we do business intelligence consulting, and we do that on behalf of a number of financial service institutions, and in particular, quite a few credit unions.
So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about the conceptual framework for analytics, and we're going to show you some practical applications. And one of the things, the terms that we're going to focus on is member-focused managerial analytics. So this isn't predictive analytics or channel analytics. This is analytics which is used by managers to create strategies and tactics which support the mission. And key here is the role of management. So we'll talk about the CEO and senior management team. Okay. So some of you might be just starting your analytics journey, and there will be a little bit here for you about how to be organized in doing that. You can be successful or not successful. Starts with organization, and there's even something in here if you're moderate to advanced. Well, you'll see how you can use it to help build your brand. And one of the key elements, and we just want to thank OnApproach, Mark and Pete. OnApproach is really critical, their M360 data warehouse, and helping you get organized, whether you're just starting or whether you're advanced. So let's just talk about mission. The title said integrating profit with mission. So this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, but what best describes your mission? Is it to be a product pusher in number one, sell as many mortgages, auto loans, and checking accounts as possible to whoever will buy them? Or is it number two, to provide the folks, your members in your community, with financial products that will help improve their lives? Whenever I do this at an in-person live audience, everybody raises their hand and says, of course, it's number two. And so in this presentation, we're going to show you how to structure your analytics around a mission that resembles number two. So you say that your mission is to help members and your communities with financial services. How are you organized? Does your organizational structure really support your mission? So is your organizational structure based on the mortgage department, the consumer loan department, the deposit operations department, or is it focused on people such as entrepreneurs, career-oriented singles, etc.? So how strong is the alignment between mission and structure? that will determine really how effective your people-based or your member-based analytics can be. And with respect to people-focused, we're going to introduce a concept a little bit later called member portfolio management. And it's all about how to use analytics to help you with that people-focused mission. So why has the credit union landscape changed so dramatically over the last 20 or so years? There used to be about 20,000, and now there are less than 6,500. Why is that? Well, in large part, not for you folks on this call, but a lot of folks out there think what worked yesterday is always going to work. It's the status quo. And being analytics people, David and I say that not using analytics to help you understand your markets, your communities, really helps hinders you from innovating and bringing to the marketplace what your folks really need. So let me tell you a story about two forward-thinking credit union CEOs who really take this approach of members first, member-based analytics. And they've realigned their organizations around member-based as opposed to product-based analytics. So the first is a gentleman named Joe Newberry at Redstone Federal Credit Union in Huntsville. And he has aligned his credit union around member life events. So they've got about 14 or so, when I spoke with them last, member life events, such as getting out of the military, getting married, having a baby, etc. And they've built their analytics around which of their members are experiencing those events. And then they've figured out what merchants and their communities can most provide the needs for the members in any particular life event, such as getting married or having a baby, once again, getting out of college. So, and they've then, through their debit card, they've created merchant discounts for those merchants with those members in those life events. So it's a really interesting database, a very interesting approach to analytics, and it's member-based. The second is a gentleman named Doug Fecker at Wright Pat Credit Union in Dayton, Ohio, and they've taken the approach of member financial health. They've aligned their members around 3 levels of member financial health: thriving, and coping, and vulnerable. And so they've aligned their products around the needs of each of those member types. And once again, it's really a member-focused approach to analytics. So this is, with analytics, David and I, we always talk about the business needs of your organization come first. The business needs of the credit union always come first. So we're not just doing analytics to do a few cross sales here and there, although they're important, but we're really using analytics to drive strategic initiatives and have a big impact on your members and communities. And so one of the things that we use is something that we call the 8 pillars of strategic alignment. And very briefly, it's starting with your core values, your mission, vision, values, who you are. Then you build strategy, and of course, analytics follows this whole path around the circle and informs each element of it, so that you build products and services around member needs, you design your member experience, you communicate it to your members, your front line, you execute You measure how did we do, and then you use that to innovate and to your next iteration to get better, all staying within your core values. So what we hope we're doing here is helping you see that there's a much broader utilization of analytics at a strategic level, rather than just kind of, the one-off campaigns that have become so popular. This is analytics at a different level, member-focused, strategically focused. So here's an example. This came from a client several years ago. It was a bank, and they had very, very little branch traffic. It had really subsided over the years, as it has everywhere. But the problem was this client had 260 branches and wasn't seeing any customers. So we took a really customer-centric approach. We built business rules that dug deeply into the database and electronically sent through a business intelligence system qualified leads of customers to each branch, taught the branch people how to pick up the phone and speak with the customer. They said, no, customers will hate it. Well, guess what? Customers loved it. It created much better relationships with customers, career paths for employees, and a lot greater profitability for the bank. So it was a huge win, and it was very focused on customer needs. So there are many, many types of analytics. And keep in mind that we're speaking about managerial analytics. So you can look at transaction and point of sale analytics, life events, like I've mentioned, credit risk, all different kinds of analytics. But we're talking, once again, to remind you about managerial analytics. How can managers use analytics to create strategies and tactics to help their credit unions grow and serve members better? And within that, there's something that we call member portfolio management. Member portfolio management is a way where we use analytics to wrap our arms around different groups of members and intentionally build strategies and relationships among them. And David right now is going to take you to a software application that we have developed for credit unions, financial institutions, and he's going to talk about member portfolio management right now.
Well, very good. The system I'm showing you is built in a platform called ClickSense, which runs on a browser. So it's very easy to deploy in a credit union, even when there's a disparate organization, perhaps a branch network. And we have developed a number of different applications that are a fit for different groups of individuals. I'm in our Member 360 application today, and I'm on the executive dashboard in this particular application. But this application is made up of a variety of analytical views. So for example, we have different sheets of analysis that are based on products, understanding where our new money is coming from, demographics, and so on. Before I talk about member portfolio analytics, what I want to do is start by describing how the data from the credit union comes into this application. And as Scott mentioned, you have many sources of data in a typical credit union, but we're going to start with the fundamentals of members. And so here in this data set, we're building up groups of member and member account data. And so in this case, I'm going to be narrowing just so I can show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to be grabbing members from what we call the end zone, using a football analogy. These are the members that are very profitable, for the credit union. And I'm going to start with this gentleman here. His name is Randall, and he is a very well cross-sold individual. In his household, he's got a checking, some share accounts, checking, debit, investment, and so on, as well as a mortgage. Very well cross-sold individual. We'd like all customers or all members to be like Randall. We know they're not. And so we are bringing this information in from the core and surfacing it up in this analytical application called QuickSense. And I'm going to start here on the dashboard and talk about how we're grouping members into what are called profit groups. We can use any metric. We're using profitability today, but we could use other metrics. But we are grouping our members into 4 different groups. And we're using a football analogy. The 10%, which are top in our profitability, top 10% of our members by profitability, we are calling them the end zone. And so they're here in this long blue bar. You can see that that top 10% of members is contributing about 80% of the profit of this particular credit union, which is really typical in organizations that we serve. And then the next 10% contributes far less in terms of profitability. The red zone, these may look for all the world like an end zone member, but they just are not yet contributing at the level that they could to be in the end zone. And then for our other members, the bulk of our members are either contributing very little in terms of profitability, or they may even be negative. They may be costing us money here in the lower tier. And so in this application, we are going to be grouping the members into different groups based on different characteristics so that we don't treat them as one size fits all, but we can develop strategies to address individual needs and thereby grow the individuals. And so one of the things we might want to do, and I'll just pick the end zone here so that we can just choose the end zone. Even in the end zone, we have ranked our households by customer risk. We may have some members that are contributing a lot of profit, but they are at risk. They may only have one service with us, perhaps a mortgage, and they may be at risk of refinancing away and leaving the credit union. And so in what we're doing here, we are going to be looking at these different different groups and building strategies to address individual needs. Ultimately, we want to get down to the members themselves. So we may go and look at our households. And here in this particular credit union, we've got 50,000 households with a wide range of instead of treating them all the same, we might want to go and find those perhaps from our end zone. So that gets us down to 5,000 households. And maybe I'd like to see those that have a mortgage but do not yet have a checking account with us. And here I've been able to quickly get to just the 1,800 members that need a very specific touch from the credit union so that we can serve them and take them to the next place in their financial journey. And so our goal is to build these strategies with members through analytics. And one of the ways we can do that is by looking at member demographics. We all know that we serve a disparate member population, and not all are coming into the credit union. And one way that we might want to examine our members is by appending demographics to them. And so here we're using some demographic information based on the address and some characteristics that are publicly available concerning our members. So we've taken our member data, we've appended demographics, and now we're looking at the top 10 demographic groups from the end zone. So these are our high profitability individuals that we're serving with the credit union. And of course, we'd expect, given that they're contributing the most profit, that most likely we're going to see some affluent or top wealth individuals in that group. But what's often remarkable is that even in this top contributory group, we have some in these groups of starting out, taking hold, and career-oriented. These may be our millennials, where even we may need a very different strategy to engage millennials compared to those that are in our top wealth. And so when we do that, of course, by making the selections, then we can go and see which are those that are millennials in our group, and we can find those that are in that top group, or maybe we'd like to address those that are not in our top profitability group, such as in the lower tier. We can do that as well to find those members that need a very specific touch based on demographics. Because we don't want to take a one-size-fits-all approach to engaging our members, and analytics can help us not do that. Finally, as we're thinking about our analytics that we're getting, and most of this data is coming to us from our core providers, and we work across a multitude of those. But one thing that's very important to look at is where is our new money coming from in the credit union. And so here I am on this particular page, and I might want to just filter only for checking accounts. So I'm just looking at the source of new money here in this analytic. And what I see is those profitability groups that I have here. And in terms of the number of accounts, and I'll just go ahead and blow this up so we can see it more clearly. In terms of the number of accounts, a number of new accounts, the end zone with 10% of our members in it is opening far less accounts in number. But as I'm looking, they're providing here, end zone is actually providing the bulk of our new money. And of course, that's natural and what we would expect. And so what's important to look at is to look at the number of households that are either new compared to those that were existing. And of course, you can apply different criteria to identify who are my new customers. And at the end of the day, we want to be able to use analytics to do forecasting and analysis, including looking at what is the share of a specific demographic group that we have in, and what is the number, what is the profit that we would change if we gain 1% in market share in each of these groups. And that helps us build our strategies in terms of how many new accounts do we have to get to affect our market share, and what's that worth in dollars to the credit union. So we can build strategies that impact our budgets, that help us do planning with analytics, all starting from examining our member data. And I'll turn it over to Scott.
Okay, David, thank you. Good job. So what's next? What's your best analytics path? We talked about at the very beginning, some might be just starting, considering what to do, some moderate, some advanced. And so if you're just starting, you always want to narrow your focus. You don't want to, at least we do not recommend trying to boil the ocean. That's not a good recipe. The best recipe for success is take one, maybe two, 5 key initiatives at the most, but you can't do all those at the same time, and build your analytics around them. So whether it's something around indirect lending, if you've got an indirect lending need, start your analytics around that. Mortgage lending, start around that. You know, really narrow your scope. Don't wait until your data is perfect. Get your requirements, get the system built, and get some develop some power users. If you're moderate in your utilization, certainly expand the number of initiatives, but make sure that those initiatives are lined up very closely with the strategy, the key direction of the credit union. And then what can happen when you get it to the moderate level is that tools tend to proliferate, and that can lead to ugly things down the road. So you want to try to moderate the number of tools that you use. And I say here, use one set, train more users, because it's not just the system, it's the more you can get the analytics utilized across your credit union by more and more people, the smarter they'll get, and the more analytics will drive your decisions and your actions. And then if you're advanced, the tendency there is to kind of get off the rails with fancy things. And that's why I gave you that 8 pillars of strategic alignment. Stay in tune with what you're trying to do strategically. And you can develop user groups across your credit union, and they can help each other understand what each one's using in terms of best practices. So now we're going to move. We talked about in the very beginning of the agenda how important it is for the executive management team to be involved in analytics. And this is so key. I've just given you a few examples here of clients of ours, Robert, Stephanie, and Jessica, all with different executive level positions, all with different needs, what they want to see from analytics, but yet all aligned as an executive team around the fact that they need to use analytics and that they need to be at the leadership of their organizations. So what does a CEO or an executive team need to do to be successful? Really 4 things. Help their analytics team create a vision around what you want to achieve as a credit union for your members, and give them timelines. And the reason for that is, I mean, without one, things can take forever. So if they have a timeline, they'll tend to put things into bite-sized chunks and get things accomplished. Make sure that your analytics team, whether they're internal or you outsource it, make sure they understand your industry. It seems simple, but a lot of analytics folks that we come across don't understand the industry, and that really is a gap in terms of return on investment. And then, as I've said, I can say this over and over again, it's so important, focus them on your key initiatives, because technology folks, analytics folks, they get really interested in numbers, really interested in data, technology, and they can start chasing rabbit trails. And the executive management, just because they're interested, right? The executive management really needs to keep them focused and on task, and touch base with them frequently. And then challenge those folks because they can kind of feel like they're not that much of a part of the credit union. So the executive management needs to draw them in and help them develop as professionals in their field, just like you help any other kind of lender or anybody else develop in their own field. So let's just summarize what we've learned. We've gone through a conceptual framework because concepts are really critical, not just software. We've gone through a framework for something that we call managerial analytics. And we've said that managerial analytics is distinct from other kinds of analytics that might be focused on transactions or channels or finance or credit or something like that. So we've talked about members before products. And we mentioned, for example, Joe Newberry at and Doug Fecker at Wright Pat Credit Union. We've mentioned how they have done that and incorporated that into their credit unions. And we've shown you some software, some applications that really put members first and help you look at this thing that we call member portfolio management. And we've said that profit groups are really essential, really the building block of member portfolio management. And why is that? Well, we know folks have all kinds of different needs, financial health needs, life event needs, but at the end of the day, you have to know who your profitable members are and who aren't profitable. And that's a fundamental building block for your decision making. We have shown you some quick and easy tools, something that we call Profit FI built in ClickSense that can help you quickly gain access to your information. And that really, you can make that as small or as large as you want it. And we've said how critical the roles of CEOs and executives teams are in building analytics. They cannot be detached from analytics, or they can't think it's some small thing, some little cross-sell thing that's happening over there in the corner. We've seen that far too often. The ones that succeed have really engaged executive teams. And so that brings us to our hosts here, OnApproach. Why do we love OnApproach? Well, because they help credit unions organize and manage their data. So you all here on this call are really a very distinct minority of your peers in the credit union industry, because you have a deep interest and perhaps are actively engaged in managing your data. You are very unique. And we love the way OnApproach helps credit unions using a variety of core applications assemble their data into something that's very organized, and it enables folks like David and I to do a much faster job and become much more efficient and cost effective for folks like you all because the data is already there for us. And in terms of what OnApproach does for you all, it just, because they have such a broad base of core experience, they get you up to speed and using your data so much faster than just starting from scratch. So if you want professional analytics help, that's what David and I are here for. We're here for you. And if you want a copy of this presentation, please reach out to me, Scott McClemens. If you'd like an analytics consultation on what are some next steps, where you are in your analytics journey, where you need to go, how to get there, David and I can speak with you. And then, of course, I've written a lot for credit unions in the last few years on the topic of analytics, done a number of live presentations, and you can see those at ceovelocity.com. So with that, I'm going to just hand it back over to Pete. Pete, thanks so much for hosting us.
Well, you're welcome, Scott and David. Thank you very much. And then I will open up the questions to the audience on the question app. If you have any questions for Scott or David, please feel free to put it into that question app. I do have a question, though, also, Scott and David. There's a lot of talk these days about using data not only from inside the credit union, but the credit union, the so-called big data. And I know that that's just kind of, from a credit union perspective, just kind of getting people's attention. Can you comment a little bit about how credit unions can start to think about not only their internal data, but all this other data that's out there? How can it help them?
Sure, that's an excellent question. And David, I'll take a crack at it. And if you want to add to it, that'd be great. But
I'll be happy to answer. Yep.
My initial thought, Pete, is yeah, there are wonderful things out in the big data world that can be extraordinarily helpful. But you've got to tackle them in the right order. So you've got to have the basics, the foundation in place. And so you've got to understand your members and their behaviors with you first. And if you have a good handle on that and are doing things with that information, you've taught yourself, you've trained your team how to do things with the information that's already coming out of your core, then that's a good time to go out and bring the big data in. That would be when you're at the moderate or probably even more toward the advanced level, not the starting out level.
I think the word big data has been thrown around a lot related to analytics, and I'll tell you, it's great to have the context for your transactions. So at the credit union, there are many transactions that are happening, and what that big data can provide, the value it provides, is the context, so that we can understand where our members are in space and what their behavior patterns are, so that we can be prepared to meet their ever-changing needs. That's really the promise of that big data, but I wholeheartedly agree that it's very wise to start with your fundamental data, and most of that's in your core. It could be a loan origination system. It could be a CRM that you already are making use of. Bringing those data points into an analytic solution is an excellent first start.
Great. Questions from the audience I have a few here. How is the system determining household?
I'll take a crack at that. We are using a householding algorithm to, and at its simplest level, you can just use simple common address level, but we are rolling things up using a householding algorithm so that we can group our member accounts into the household that they come from. And so I'm David Fields, and so my wife may have accounts, and perhaps my kids have an account. We are grouping those in our apps into a household unit.
Okay. Next question. What is your approach, that being data used and the method, for determining member profitability?
So that could take a number of directions, but typically, and some credit unions have profitability data, others do not. What we don't do, what we are not, is a profitability company. So we take whatever the CFO gives us, whatever the CFO blesses in terms of profitability. That's the data that we use. The important thing, Pete, is not so much the profitability, although that's we love to get that if we can get it, but rather the important thing in this member portfolio management system is, how does the credit union assess the financial value, the financial impact that members make? And it could be, if you don't have profitability, it could be loan dollars, could be number of shares, it could be either of those, could be the balances, combined balances. So profitability and the methodology isn't as critical as, can we get to a spot where we're comfortable rank ordering our members in terms of the financial impact they make to the credit union? Because the last thing we want to do is get into a big theoretical profitability discussion that holds the credit union back from doing anything? Is that about as clear as mud?
I like it. That's great. Then one of the slides you showed, the questioner asked, showed percentage of market share for the end zone segment. Is this the market share or the share of wallet for those members?
In this case, we're using market share data that we're getting through a third-party provider. So what they're providing us through a demographic provider is total market information for a given demographic segment. And then we're looking at how many of those are our members. And so we want to understand which segments of the market are we strongly penetrating and where do we have perhaps the least penetration. We want to assess which one of those we should be targeting from a strategy perspective.
And to David's point, it is in this case household share, but we also have another application, and it can be used in this one as well, in which we look at share of wallet. It just depends on what the client wants to look at.
They're relevant.
What's important.
They're relevant. Yeah.
What relationship do you see between the data warehouse a credit union might already have internally versus the M360 data warehouse? And I think I can probably field that a little bit. The M360 data warehouse from OnApproach is one that we typically work with clients who have no data warehouse at all. They usually are starting from scratch. However, we have had some clients that have pre-existing data warehouses, and they've had to make a choice usually. One is that they can take the data in the existing warehouse up to a certain point and continue to use that, and then the data after that goes into the M360 data warehouse. Conversely, they can close down the prior data warehouse, import the data, the historical data, into the M3 warehouse, and then go forward from there. So it's up to the credit union how they want to handle that. Here's another question. Does Profit FI calculate the profitability, or do we need to have our own platform that has calculated profitability? I think you talked about that a little bit.
That's right. You need to have your own platform or your own method of rank ordering your customers according to their financial contribution.
And there again, we often develop the surrogates for profitability, because what we're really after is not in member portfolio analysis coming up with a total profit number that we can take to the bank, so to speak. What we're really after is some method by which we can group our members based on their financial viability or the contribution that they're making to our profit.
Okay. Questioner says, we are using a number of different auxiliary systems to the core, collections, credit card, etc. Is the system currently designed to capture data from these kind of systems? I'll speak to that again. That M360 is a platform which is set up to take data from multiple source systems. You may have a core that covers any number of types of functionality, subject areas, but then again, you may have a separate system, like a loan origination system, that is a best of breed type of system that you prefer to use to your core, or the core might not handle that. M360 is set up to take all the fundamental subject areas that a credit union handles and oversees, and brings that into our patented data model. So we cover the waterfront when it comes to all the things that credit unions typically are looking at for their data. The questioner asked, go ahead. Okay. can you please talk about the importance of ensuring that the credit unions might have the infrastructure in place? Also, can you please touch on how cloud computing can allow credit unions rapidly get their platforms up and running and allow credit unions to continue to load more and more data, that being elasticity?
I can speak to that. I heard a couple of different comments there. One was, what is the type of infrastructure that needs to be had, and can it be in the cloud? And our platform certainly can be in the cloud. And oftentimes, the technology exists today to secure the data in the cloud, which is very important. Certainly a lot of, especially small credit unions that we've worked with, are making use of the service bureau model, where they do not host all of their core systems. And so one of the things that we usually do in our consulting is help our customers establish those conduits from their service bureau into an analytic solution. Those are things that can be done straightforwardly, and this can be put into the cloud as a platform, or it could be located on-prem in a data center. I've heard some beeps. I'm not sure if the audio is working correctly.
No, we're all good. We're all good. All good. Just technical blips here.
Okay.
Question then, the questioner has, what are the demographic groups which are used for analytics? For example, starting out, developed based on individual credit union or a broader multi-CU big data analytics?
They're based on much broader. They're based on much broader analytics nationally through a number of different sources. We work with different demographic providers, and the interesting thing about what we have here is that for example, the affluent or starting out, those will each break out into different clusters as well. So there could be anywhere from 3 to 6, maybe 8 different clusters, and it really lets you, I would say, refine your approach to different groups of members. So you might say, well, we want to solidify our relationship with different affluent households, or with affluent end zone households, or we want to know why some affluent households are low profitability. Well, we can take a look at really much more refined segments than what you see here and determine various approaches to them. Sorry, David, what were you going to say?
Well, I think you've covered it well. It's fine. The demographic groups that we're using here in this data set do come from an external data provider. In this case, it's an Axiom-based company. What we're doing is we're bringing in members from the core, and then we're appending demographics to those member households so that we can group our membership group here. And as Scott said, they have different clusters within them, so we can build individual strategies for groups that have some definition. That's
okay.
Remarkably affordable and easy to bring into analytics.
All right. It looks like I'll mention, are there any other questions from the audience? Please feel free to ask through the question app at this point. Well, seeing no further questions, then I would like to thank our speakers today. The important things that you've covered have been very interesting, and I really appreciate your great insights to those. I wondered, Scott and David, if you had any final thoughts.
I would say that this is a must. Analytics is a must strategy. Get it done one way or the other. It is much more affordable than any credit union can really imagine. And don't just get it in, don't just buy the software, but learn how to creatively tell stories with the data, which can then impact your members and build your brand. And we really appreciate you guys from OnApproach for hosting us as well. You guys have been really great. We've really enjoyed your friendship over the last few years.
Well, thank you. David, any parting thoughts from you?
It's been a pleasure to present today. Looking forward to engaging further and answering questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Scott and David. I hope everyone enjoyed today's session. As Scott noted, the copy of the slides are available on his information there. We'll send up a follow-up email also to see if there's any further questions that people would like answered and so forth. I want to thank my colleague Mark Ports for handling all the behind-the-scenes work for the webinar. OnApproach is usually showing webinars like this once a month, and we'll be soon rolling out our webinars under the brand of our new CU App Store, which is about to launch very shortly. You'll hear more about that through press releases and so forth, but I think it's an exciting destination ultimately for credit unions to come find excellent applications that they can use in their credit unions that fit into this piece of analytic data. So again, I thank you for your participation today, everyone, and have a great day. Until next time, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Pete.